Have you ever noticed that you're checking your phone without even remembering picking up the device? That strange sensation of waking up in the middle of the night and before even fully processing where you are, your hand is already moving toward the glowing screen beside your bed? Or perhaps you've noticed how during an important conversation with someone you love, part of your mind is still thinking about the notification that just arrived, creating an internal division that makes you feel both present and absent at the same time. If these moments resonate with your experience, you are not alone in a struggle that goes far beyond simple questions of self-control or personal discipline. What you are feeling is the reflection of one of the most profound and disturbing transformations in human history, a change so radical in the nature of our attention and consciousness that many of the most perceptive people of our time are quietly withdrawing from the digital world, not out of nostalgia or resistance to progress, but from a visceral understanding that something fundamental about what it means to be human is at stake. For centuries, the evolution of human consciousness followed a relatively predictable pattern. We developed tools that extended our physical capabilities from the wheel to industrial machines, but our fundamental mental processes remained relatively untouched for millennia. An 18th century farmer still thought, processed information, and formed relationships in ways that would be recognizable to his ancestors from 2,000 years before. Human attention, that precious and limited capacity to consciously focus on specific aspects of reality, functioned according to the same basic principles that had guided our species throughout its entire evolutionary journey. We had natural periods of intense focus, alternated with moments of creative dispersion, cycles of social engagement, followed by needs for solitude and reflection, rhythms of activity and rest that respected the deep patterns of our nervous system. Even when we invented writing, the printing press, or the telegraph, these technologies amplified our capabilities without fundamentally reprogramming the neural circuits that govern how we think and feel. What happened in the last 2 decades represents a historic rupture of this millennial continuity. For the first time in human history, we have created a technological system that does not merely extend our capabilities, but actively reconstructs the basic patterns of how our mind functions. Contemporary digital platforms are not simply tools we use, but cognitive environments we inhabit. And these environments were designed by some of the brightest minds of our time with a very specific objective: to capture and monetize our attention through the creation of behavioral patterns that precisely mimic the neurological mechanisms of addiction. Every infinite scroll, every strategically timed notification, every recommendation algorithm has been refined through billions of human interactions to maximize what designers call engagement time, an elegant euphemism for describing the ability to make us unable to stop using their products, even when this causes us evident suffering. The most lucid people in our society have begun to recognize that this transformation is not accidental or an unwanted side effect of technological progress, but the direct result of a business model that treats human attention as raw material to be extracted and sold to advertisers. Technology executives who helped build these systems now send their own children to schools that completely prohibit the use of digital devices. Programmers who wrote engagement maximization algorithms practice intensive meditation to recover their capacity for focused attention. Neuroscientists who study the effects of digital technology on the brain choose to live in houses without Wi-Fi and use phones that only make calls. These are not technophobes or nostalgics for a bygone era, but professionals who deeply understand how these technologies work and who have made a conscious choice about what kind of mental life they want to preserve. The understanding emerging from this growing community of digital refugees is that the contemporary commercial internet was not designed to serve us, but to consume us. Every platform operates according to principles that are fundamentally incompatible with the flourishing of human consciousness. Speed has replaced reflection. Instant reaction has replaced thoughtful response. Constant external validation has replaced internal confidence. And simulation of connection has replaced real intimacy. The result is a form of life that produces constant low-grade anxiety, a persistent sensation that we are always missing something important, a growing inability to tolerate silence or solitude, and a fragmentation of attention that makes it progressively more difficult to engage deeply with any activity, relationship, or idea. Even more disturbing is the recognition that these effects are not limited to moments when we are actively using digital devices. The mere presence of a smartphone in the same environment, even when turned off, has been shown in repeated studies to significantly reduce our cognitive capacity. Our brain allocates mental resources to continuously monitor the possibility of new information, creating a state of constant partial alertness that prevents the kind of deep relaxation necessary for creativity, introspection, and emotional well-being. We have discovered that we are living in a state of permanent divided attention, where a significant part of our mental energy is always reserved for processing potential digital stimuli, leaving fewer resources available for the real life happening before us. The people who are consciously withdrawing from this system are not simply rejecting technology, but actively choosing a different way of existing in the world. They are rediscovering human capabilities that were beginning to seem obsolete, the ability to sustain focused attention for prolonged periods, the capacity to tolerate and even appreciate boredom as a fertile state for the emergence of new ideas, the art of being completely present in conversations without the compulsion to document or share the experience, and the deep pleasure of engaging with activities for their intrinsic value rather than for their potential to generate social validation online. This silent migration represents more than a personal preference or a temporary countercultural movement. It signals the recognition that we are facing a fundamental civilizational choice about what kind of conscious beings we want to be. On one side, we have the path of ever deeper integration with digital systems that promise efficiency, connection, and unlimited access to information, but that in practice produce mental fragmentation, chronic anxiety, and a form of alienation that is simultaneously hyper-connected and deeply lonely. On the other side, we have the possibility of preserving and cultivating forms of consciousness that value depth over speed, quality over quantity, presence over productivity, and wisdom over information. What makes this choice particularly urgent is that we are rapidly approaching a tipping point where the generations that grew up before the commercial internet will begin to represent an increasingly smaller minority of the population. Children being born today will never know a world where human attention is not considered a resource to be extracted and sold. For them, constant mental fragmentation, anxiety over online social validation, and the inability to tolerate moments of non-stimulation will seem not only normal, but natural. Unless we take conscious measures to preserve and transmit alternative ways of existing, we risk completely losing cognitive and emotional capabilities that took millions of years to evolve. I need to pause for a moment to ask you directly, have you felt this growing tension between the time you spend connected and the quality of your mental life? That sensation that even when you manage to step away from screens, something in your ability to concentrate, to feel simple pleasure, or to be truly present has changed in a way that is difficult to articulate? I know we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming dramatic, or because we believe we should simply be able to better control our technology use. But if this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel the technology changed my mind when." Your honesty may be exactly what another person needs to read today to understand that they are not alone in this experience and that questioning these systems is not weakness, but lucidity. The digital refugees who are emerging are not proposing a romantic return to a pre-technological era, but a more conscious and intentional relationship with the tools they choose to use. They are creating physical and mental spaces that operate according to different principles. Homes where technology serves specific functions without dominating the environment, daily routines that include significant periods of digital disconnection, contemplative practices that strengthen the capacity for sustained attention, and relationships that prioritize mutual presence over shared documentation. This is not about purism or perfectionism, but about recognizing that human consciousness, like any complex system, requires specific conditions to flourish, and that these conditions are becoming progressively rarer in the contemporary world. This understanding is beginning to influence fields that go far beyond personal technology. Schools are experimenting with curricula that teach digital hygiene as an essential life skill. Companies are redesigning work environments to include technology-free zones where creativity and deep collaboration can emerge. Architects are designing spaces that encourage ways of life that do not depend on constant digital stimulation. Therapists are developing new treatment modalities to address forms of anxiety and depression that seem to be directly related to intensive use of digital technology. Researchers are exploring ancient contemplative traditions in search of practices that can help the contemporary mind recover capabilities that are being eroded by hyperconnectivity. What emerges from these diverse experiments is a more nuanced understanding of the relationship between technology and human flourishing. The question is not whether we should or should not use digital tools, but how we can create conditions where technology genuinely serves our development as conscious beings instead of transforming us into products to be optimized for others' profit. This requires not only individual changes, but a fundamental re-evaluation of the business models that sustain the contemporary digital economy. As long as human attention is treated primarily as a resource to be extracted, any healthy use of technology will be a form of resistance that demands constant vigilance. The most lucid people are beginning to understand that preserving mental sanity in the 21st century may require the same kind of consciousness and care that our ancestors applied to preserving physical health in hostile environments. Just as we learn to filter polluted water, avoid contaminated food, and protect our skin from excessive radiation, we may need to develop cognitive equivalents, practices and technologies that filter toxic information, protect us from systematic psychological manipulation, and preserve our capacity to think clearly and independently in an environment designed to produce confusion and dependence. This is not a battle that can be won through individual willpower or personal productivity strategies. It requires a collective understanding that we are facing a form of pollution that affects not the air we breathe or the water we drink, but the very medium through which we experience reality. And like other forms of pollution, it disproportionately affects those with fewer resources to protect themselves, creating a new form of inequality where access to focused attention and mental peace becomes a privilege rather than a basic human right. The future unfolding before us presents two divergent trajectories. In one, we accept constant mental fragmentation as the inevitable price of modern life and adapt our expectations about what it means to have a healthy and functional mind. In this trajectory, the capacity for sustained attention, tolerance for solitude, and the ability to engage deeply with complex ideas become historical curiosities, preserved perhaps in some specialized niches, but irrelevant to most people's experience. The other trajectory involves recognizing that certain cognitive and emotional capabilities are too precious to be sacrificed on the altar of digital convenience, and working consciously to preserve and transmit these capabilities to future generations. The choice between these trajectories will not be made through government policies or corporate decisions. Although these factors are important, it will be made through millions of individual decisions about how we want to live, what kind of mind we want to cultivate, and what values we want to incorporate into the basic structures of our daily life. The people who are choosing to step away from digital hyperconnectivity are not fleeing from the future, but taking a stance on what kind of future they want to help create. They are preserving human capabilities that may seem obsolete today, but that may be essential for navigating even greater challenges awaiting our species. This conscious preservation of human attention may prove to be one of the most radical and necessary acts of our time, in an era where almost everything is being quantified, optimized, and monetized, choosing to protect the quality of our inner life represents a form of resistance that goes to the heart of what it means to be human. This is not about nostalgia or fear of progress, but about evolutionary wisdom, a recognition that some characteristics of human experience are too fundamental to be redesigned by algorithms whose primary purpose is to maximize advertising revenue. If these reflections have touched on something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone and that questioning these systems is not a sign of weakness or inadequacy to the modern world. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of how to preserve your sanity and wisdom amid the transformations we are experiencing. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also more conscious ways of living amid the pressures and possibilities of the contemporary world. This is not just a channel, but a space for reflection and collective growth. For those who recognize that our inner life is too precious to be left to chance, join us in this continuous journey of preserving and cultivating what is most essential in human experience, the silent movement of those who are choosing a more conscious relationship with digital technology may represent the seeds of a broader cultural transformation. Perhaps we are witnessing the first signs of an emerging collective wisdom, a recognition that true human progress is not measured only by the speed with which we process information or the efficiency with which we execute tasks, but by the depth with which we experience life, the quality of relationships we cultivate, and the peace we find in our own company. The most lucid people of our time are not fleeing from the future, but working to create a future where being human still means something more than being an optimized consumer of digital content. to fake people, and in the process we lose the ability to create intimacy with real human beings, because real human beings are much more problematic than AIs. AI that wants to become your intimate friend, its greatest advantage is that it has no feelings of its own. It's never upset, it's never angry, it's never tired. It can focus on you 100% and understand exactly how you feel, create fake sense of intimacy. You try to establish a relationship with a human being, the feelings come in between. This extremely cynical view of humans is not true. Yes, humans are interested in power to some extent in some situations, but this is not the only thing that we want. We are not power-crazy demons. If you look at yourself, start with yourself. Mm-hmm. If I look at myself, do I want power in life? Yes, in some situations I want. This is not the only thing. I really want to know the truth about myself, my life, the world. And the key reason for that is that if you don't know the truth about yourself, you can never be happy. Because you don't know what are the sources of misery in your life, and you can't solve them.